Today is Tuesday, January 9th, 2018. It's 10 a.m. and it's my pleasure to call to order today's meeting of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Mrs. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Dennis Bridges.
Here.
Mark Cawthorn.
Here.
Robert Davis.
Here.
Jeff Duffer.
Here.
Clark McKinney.
Here.
Charles Rahm.
Here.
Robert Shackelford.
Here.
Mr. President, all board members are here and accounted for.
Thank you, Mrs. Bohannon. We need to, first order of business, we need to welcome a new board member joining us today, Mr. Robert Shackelford from West Tennessee. And we congratulate you on your appointment and we welcome you to this board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We next need to review and adopt the agenda for today's meeting.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. McKinney and a second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor?
Aye.
We have the adoption of the rules, Robert's Rules of Order. The rules contained in the most recent version of the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, shall govern this board in all cases to which they are applicable and in which they are not inconsistent with statutes and any special rules of order the board may adopt. Does this need to be a vote taken?
Yes, sir,
All right.
please.
All right. Motion?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. McKinney, a second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor?
Aye.
Board members, I think each of you have seen the conflict of interest statement before you, and I think each of us should have a conflict of interest statement before you to be signed and returned to Ms. Bohannon. Have we received all?
Yes, Mr. President, I've received all of those.
All right. We have the minutes from the December 12 board meeting that we need to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Duffer, a second by Mr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Legal report.
President, if it's okay, we'll go to the director's report and come back and get the legal report in just a second.
That will be fine. Mr. Gribble?
On the director's report, first today we have the legislative update. We have not received official notification from the Tennessee State Funeral Director and Morticians Association, the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, or funeral-related parties of any legislative proposals that they intend to pursue during the 2018 session, which reconvenes today at noon. And with council here, you want me to go through this?
If you'll just continue, we'll
Continue on? Okay. The second thing is report of licenses administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to the board authority for the period of December 12, 2017 through January 8, 2018. You see those individuals listed in type licenses that they all received. There are no closed establishments to be reported to the board since the last board meeting. Disciplinary action. This is a report of consent orders that have been administratively accepted and approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority and as they were reported on the November 2017 regulatory board's disciplinary action report. There are 3 establishments listed there, their locations, their violations, and their civil penalties. Complaint report as of yesterday, there were 25 complaints open against funeral directors and our embalmers, and that would include any apprentice funeral directors and our apprentice embalmers, and 44 against establishments, for a total number of 69 open complaints. Mr. President, that concludes my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions that the board might have.
Any questions from board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Bridges, a second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor?
Aye.
We will back up one step to our legal report. Mr. Glandorf is here.
Good morning, members. My
Good morning.
apologies for being a few minutes late this morning. I was trying to run from one meeting to another, and starting to make movement at 10 o'clock doesn't get you there on time, so I apologize. I'll go ahead and I'll read you all the legal report here. We'll start with number one. It has a lengthy summary there, and I will try to distill some of that down here. There was a complaint in which this individual alleged there was unsatisfactory service by the establishment. There was a lot of allegations involved, such as starting 3 hours late, attendees having to wait outside, that there were flowers that were not ordered, or a limousine was not provided, and an obituary wasn't printed. Also indicated that it was announced at the funeral that the burial would not take place following the service because of the weather, but they really wanted to pressure the family to cremate and refuse to bury the deceased until payment was made in full. So there's a payment issue here also. The respondent responded contending that a limousine was never ordered and therefore not provided, that the flowers were not ordered even though they were listed on the statement of funeral goods and services because they were not paid for in advance because it was a cash advance item. Respondent also stated that the body was not buried until payment was made in full because of their policy as a funeral home, that the only reason it allowed the service to take place was because the family actually had assigned a time for the ceremony on their own initiative by informing friends over Facebook and whatnot. There was an issue regarding the death certificate that they indicated was inadvertently filed with Metro Vital Records instead of the state of Tennessee. So we conducted an investigation on this matter, and what it revealed is that the complainant actually informed the respondent that they couldn't afford to pay for the funeral and embalmer services in full that was listed on the funeral statement of goods and services selected. So the respondent actually entered into the statement of funeral goods and services on December 22nd, and the amount that's listed on there is $4,695. He accepted an initial payment of $650. However, there's an affidavit signed by the respondent as to the actual charges and the amount that the complainant paid, and it's been paid in full now, is $4,885.50. So there was a discrepancy there. What happened is that the original statement of funeral goods and services had a value of $4,695. What was subtracted from that were some cash advance items. Flowers were taken off of that. It was written out into the margin. There was some cards, memorial cards that were taken off that was written out to the side. And there was certain things that were added in there, such as an opening and closing that wasn't previously on there. So from our investigation, the math works out correctly. It's $4,885.50 is what the cost of all of those were. The issue that we have in the recommendation that we have is because there was not a second statement of funeral goods and services created, an amended one that was signed by the complainant that shows everything that they actually contracted for, as we recommend a civil penalty amount of $750 for violations of the funeral rule regarding there was a lack of an outer burial container on the general price list, or OBC. This was an item that was actually sold that they said they normally didn't have, so there was actually no price list on there. That was negotiated later, and for failing to provide that updated statement of funeral goods and services to the complainant. Additionally, we asked to assess the investigation cost in this matter of having to investigate it of $170, which is the cost to the program to investigate that matter. I have a copy of the statement of funeral goods and services if any of you all would like to see it also.
Comments or questions from the board?
You have a copy of that you can pass around.
As we wrote there, the grand total is $4,695 is what shows on this document here. What was actually paid was $4,885.50. And you can see that items were subtracted out over off to the side. And I'm not sure if that was present at the time that they entered into this agreement or if it was done later.
So this out-of-barrel container that the family chose, you said that's something that's not normally on, that they offer?
That's correct. It wasn't on the general price list, and it wasn't on a OBC list either. And they've said that in their response. So they said they normally didn't offer these, but it was requested by the family, so they purchased one. That's my understanding of the funeral rules, that all of those items have to be listed on the general price list, or you have to have a separate out-of-burial container list with that price on there.
That is normally offered, regularly offered.
That's right.
If it's something that is just
Specialty.
special ordered or special request, it's my understanding it does not have to be on there. I don't see, if in fact that the investigator went back and, that was a wood pine box, that they haven't used a pine box in recent months or years, then I don't see where there's a violation.
I would agree with that.
And as far as the family having to actually sign another statement of goods after there have been additions or subtractions, that's something we don't normally do either, unless it's they sign the initial statement of goods when they make arrangements. And if there are to be things added, then that's added on later. Most families are made aware of that. Necessarily see a violation there either. So I guess I'm trying to get to where, I guess to the fruit of the matter here. Is it that the family was just disturbed at the professionalism of the funeral home, or
The lack of?
the lack of? Yes.
When the investigation occurred on site at the funeral home, did the inspector look back to previous records just to see if that wooden box, that pine box, was something that they normally were selling?
No, the respondent said in their affidavit they normally don't sell this.
They said that, okay.
But the investigator didn't look
I don't remember
past.
I don't
Okay.
remember the investigator looking
Okay.
back to see if
they had looked, in past several months or year and found that there had been no such container sold, then that would kind of prove their point. Or if they found that they had sold one, a couple of months ago or a year ago, that they did offer it and didn't have it on the price list, then that would be a violation. But I don't see, if they don't regularly offer it, I don't see where that.
Just one of the biggest issues that I have is that it clearly states that she paid for flowers, but she did not get flowers.
Okay.
So that was my, maybe so that there wasn't confusion, is my recommendation that they should have had a second statement of funeral goods and services selected, is that there are items on here that they indicated that they're going to provide, that she is paying for, and then just off to the side you have 185.80, and you have no indication that two parties agreed to that. So that was one of her biggest points of confusion, was what did she get when she paid for that she did not get flowers, was one of the things. Probably has to do with the fact that it's a cash advance item, and how much was she supposed to put down in order to make that cash advance happen or whatnot. Like we said in the write-up, there was only initially $650 that was paid, which created all of this, probably all of this confusion as to what services were going to be provided when. So, from a standpoint of misleading or deception, is that generally consumers should be shown what they're actually paying for and how much they're paying.
So there were flowers and a limousine that were not provided that were.
That's correct, because those flowers were taken off of the side. Actually, the limousine service, I didn't put that in there because I couldn't find anything that referenced the limousine service, so I did not take that into consideration. It may have been alleged, but I didn't see anything in there that indicated there would be a limousine service.
What about the obituary? Did you find that it actually was published, or? I know that was one of the allegations, but upon investigation, and I see that it was.
No, the news service notice was taken off. Also, you can see there.
Okay, and that's why you're saying that's why it was taken off, because there
correct.
weren't flowers and there was not an obituary.
That's correct.
I got you.
So when they investigated about the flowers, did they ask the question, since it was a cash advance item, did the family order the flowers from the florist and that funeral home was paying on their behalf, or was the funeral home securing the flowers?
I don't have the investigation in front of me, so I don't have. It's a pretty thorough investigation, but I don't. The funeral home did not purchase the flowers. They were not purchased. They were going to, but they did not. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sometimes, families will come in and they'll say, I've called XYZ florist, and they will order the flowers. And they will say, would you mind taking care of paying for it on my behalf? And then they add it to the contract. So the question is, why didn't the flowers arrive to the funeral home? So did the family order it, or did the funeral home say that they were going to order it? That's a question I would have.
Print off the investigation report.
Did they pay for something they didn't get?
No. That was at the end of the day. So I think I was trying to make sure it was clear. They paid $4,885.50, and from what we saw, they received everything that they paid for. They did receive everything that they paid for. Not an item that he was paid for something and somebody wasn't provided. The confusion is a complaint is they don't necessarily. It doesn't appear that they know what they paid for, and they don't have documentation as to what they paid for, because this right here cannot be figured out without having supplemental statements between everybody as to what was actually provided and what was given. And so my understanding of the funeral rule is to ensure that there's no confusion as to what you're purchasing. That's part of why it's out there, to make sure that everything that you have selected to purchase is listed on here so that the consumer that has that.
So is the funeral home willing to provide that to this family?
Oh, the document?
A document that would
I don't
reflect
know.
what they have paid?
I don't know.
Oh, if it is this funeral home's policy to require that all cash advances or third-party services be paid in full before they are ordered or delivered.
I don't know if that's their policy. If Hassam can get the investigation, we can see if that is their routine, if they provide anybody any credit on that, or if not. I would guess that they would be no, because of the fact that there was some issues with whether or not they were going to actually have the burial take place and whether because those funds weren't paid. So there was an issue with that. Like I said, the respondent said they weren't even going to have the service until the fact that this family had already indicated when the service was going to be. At.
The information that I've got so far, I don't feel comfortable issuing a penalty of over $2,500 to this firm at this time.
Neither do I.
Mr. McKinney, with that being said, do you have a recommendation?
Yet.
Does the board feel like it needs additional information before making a decision in this case? And if so, what information would you like to have?
Well, I would be willing to table it until we get more information, if there's any to come, or a better explanation, or just, I guess I sound like a judge here, but at this point, either that or throw it out altogether.
That in the form of a motion?
No, that's just my thoughts right now.
So we know
I'm
then-
willing to hear from everybody else here to see what y'all think.
So we know that the family did receive everything that they were told that they were going to get, right? Based on this.
Based on our investigation, yes. We can see where they made all the payments.
You may not know this, but I just, out of curiosity, I didn't know if this form was ever shown to the family and they said, hey, listen, this stuff on the side was never here. You know, I didn't know if they ever denied that, or do you know if that question was asked to the
So
family?
I can get the answer to that.
Okay. I just didn't know if they questioned the credibility of that document.
The I don't see on here where there's a section for items added later. I don't think I'm overlooking that, but, I mean, we have a section on ours, but,
Well, some of the statement of goods and services selected forms don't allow that to happen, but then you can give them an accounting record after the fact with showing those adjustments that have been made.
I agree.
So going back to the state's recommendation about the funeral rule regarding the outer barrel container, I think, are we clear on that as a board?
I am.
So based on the recommendation, then we want to table, we want to make a motion here?
Based on day-to-day operations, again, as all of you are in the industry, I mean, is it something that you would want to send a letter of warning, close with, hey, but you need to change it? I'm just curious if there's anything on this that you see that, hey, they probably should have done better, but they're not necessarily in violation of anything. So I don't know that, does it warrant a letter of warning or a letter of caution?
I don't see any violations personally.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that something needs to be provided to the family to show them what they did purchase, where they have a clear understanding, opposed to these negatives and pluses on the side of this document.
Mm-hmm.
That way, they would feel more comfortable about it.
I agree with that.
That's something maybe you'd feel, close, but with a letter of warning or a letter of instruction. I don't know what the proper term is. Maybe noting that in the letter.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gribble, there is a difference, right, between a letter of, is there a difference or is that the same thing? I thought at some point maybe we were told that was, there was.
Neither are discipline.
Right.
It doesn't discipline anybody. A letter of
Yeah.
warning, we can do a letter of warning where it says you've done something wrong, we think you did, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
We'll give you a warning, just kind of like if you got pulled over for speeding.
Sure.
I mean, you were speeding, but they gave you a warning. Letter of instruction instructs you that you should amend the way that you do things in the
Okay.
future to do X. And
Gotcha.
so that's generally what a letter of instruction does.
Okay.
To
So I'll make a motion that we close with a letter of instruction.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Cochran and a second by Mr. Duffer to close this with a letter of instruction. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next.
Okay, number 2 through 4, these all relate to the same instance where there was an anonymous complaint that was given that alleged that a respondent and embalmer stole personal items of a deceased that were released from the medical examiner's office with the deceased body, which included, it was $463 in cash was the issue. It was an anonymous complaint. The respondent replied saying that all items were released to the family members, and that everything was provided to them, including the $463. There was an investigation that was conducted by an investigator. Contacted the mother of the deceased. She confirmed that she did not file the complaint against the respondent, and that she did receive all of the belongings, including the jewelry. There was jewelry and money that were on his person. Recommend closure.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. McKinney, a second by Mr. Bridges. All in favor?
Number 5, 6, 7 all relate to the same occurrence. These complaints were of the same transaction occurrence that were provided to you at our last meeting. These are additional complaints that have come in by different people under the same instance. Basically, at the last meeting, the board addressed issues of a complainant's family where there was a separate complaint filed by a competitor where the board previously authorized a formal hearing and a consent order for revocation of the funeral establishment license and all directors, managers, and embalmers license for failing to supervise, manage the location, aiding and abetting an unlicensed person to practice. The actual substance of the complaint, this complainant is the daughter of the decedent. The complainant decided not to use the services of the respondent and contacted another funeral home and asked that its establishment provide the services and execute a statement of funeral goods and services selected with that establishment. The complainant went to the respondent's establishment to retrieve the mother's body. The respondent's establishment employed an unlicensed individual, and this individual refused to release the body until the family paid an additional $700 for a basic casket. The complainant stated that they used profane language with the establishment's representative, and that when they attempted to pay by check, they would not accept the check to release the body. As I said, we already provided the substance of the facts of this case at the last meeting, and you all have authorized revocation against this establishment and the funeral director and embalmer license. And so we would just ask, as our recommendation here, to include these complaints, which is just another complainant to the same matter, to that authorization, which was authorization for a revocation of the funeral director, manager's license, and embalmer's license for failing to supervise and manage locations and aiding and abetting an unlicensed person there.
I'll make a motion to accept the council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Duffer, a second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8 and 9, there was a routine inspection that was conducted on this one. There was a notice of violation issued for a funeral director who was serving in the capacity of a manager, and the notice of violation for the funeral establishment during time which the funeral director's license was invalid. It was expired in June 30th and was reinstated on September 6th. Notably, this was before our inspection took place, and the funeral director's license has since been renewed. Our recommendation to the establishment is to authorize a $250 civil penalty because this has previously happened. They were previously given a letter of warning on a 2009. And then to close with a letter of warning to the actual funeral director, it being their first.
Is this in keeping with what we've done before?
I believe that it's the board's method to issue letter of warnings on first issues of license renewals during minor periods and then rank it up $250 in subsequent measures. So that's exactly what I went with. The funeral establishment previously had its own license that was lapsed, and here on this case it was their funeral director's license who was lapsed. So because they have some responsibility, their civil penalty, they already had a letter warning that went to a civil penalty, and then the funeral director, it was the first instance that this happened. Notably, they renewed it prior to our inspection. We just found it during the inspection that they had been lapsed and been serving as a manager for that time. So we have a letter of warning against that funeral director personally. That's how we've.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. McKinney, a second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Number 11 is very similar to what we just previously saw. So there was a routine inspection here, and the respondent's establishment was issued a notice of violation for allowing its funeral director to continue a position as manager while its funeral director's license was expired. It was expired for approximately 10 days. The funeral director's license was renewed on August 10th prior to our inspection, and so in keeping with that, since that funeral establishment had previously had issues with that before, recommended authorization for a $250 civil penalty and closed with a letter of warning to the funeral director. They have no prior history of any disciplinary issues.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Cochran, a second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That concludes this legal report. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Landor.
After you got past the first one, you were on a roll.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of license applications.
President, you have one individual to come before you today. His name is Brian Michael Van Heck. He is from Mooresville, North Carolina, recently moved to Tennessee. He's applying for a funeral director and embalmer's license by reciprocity. Your paperwork will say Michigan and Illinois. That's a typo on my part. It should be he is presently licensed in Michigan and North Carolina. Mr. Van Heck, if you will, introduce yourself to the board and tell them a little bit about yourself and tell them probably have some questions for you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. I've been in funeral service for 18 plus years and currently licensed and in good standing with no complaints in any point in time in the state of Michigan as a mortuary science licensee, which is the dual license in the state of Michigan, as well as in good standing as a funeral service licensee in the state of North Carolina, which is the dual license in that state as well. I've recently accepted an opportunity with Family Legacy Funeral Homes owner Bill Gregory, and so I'm applying by reciprocity for funeral director and embalmer license.
The only reason he's here is because he answered yes to one of those questions, Mr. Gribble.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Haven't had any issues since 2007?
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Six and 2007, is that correct?
November 15th of last year was celebrating a decade of a new lifestyle to those 2 points.
Congratulations on that piece.
I will make a motion that we approve this application.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. McKinney, a second by Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We'll send you an email either this afternoon or no later than tomorrow that'll have your license numbers and everything.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Yes,
You
sir.
are?
Yeah. Any establishments, Mr. Gribble?
No, sir, there are no establishments this month to come before the board.
Business that needs to come before the board. And a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned.
Nothing.